he shouted, throwing her suitcase onto the wet lawn, calling her a beggar. His mother applauded. His mistress smiled. She never argued. 6 hours earlier, she'd signed a $60 billion deal. Then the ignored old gardener spoke 6 words. Every single smile died. The rain had stopped, but the grass was still wet. That is the kind of small detail your eyes remember on the worst morning of your life. Nala remembered it. She would remember the wet grass longer than she remembered his voice. Xavier stood on the porch of the big house on Bellhaven Drive, and he was screaming. "You came with nothing, you leave with nothing," he shouted, and his hand came down like a hammer. The suitcase left his fingers and hit the lawn. It bounced once. The zipper split. A sleeve of one of her dresses spilled out onto the wet green like a wound. "You leave with nothing. You hear me? Nothing." Neighbors were coming out now. Doors opening up and down the street. A woman across the road held her coffee halfway to her mouth and forgot to drink it. 2 men by a parked truck stopped talking. Everybody looked. That was the point. Xavier wanted them to look. "Beggar," he said. He said it slow so it would land. "That's all you ever were. A beggar I felt sorry for." Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever watched a person get torn apart in public, and the worst part wasn't the words, it was how many people were smiling while it happened? Because they were smiling. On the porch behind Xavier was his mother, Loretta, 61 years old, pearls at her throat, chin lifted like she was watching a parade. And when the suitcase hit the grass, Loretta brought her hands together and clapped. Soft, slow claps. The way you clap for a child who finally learned a lesson. "Took you long enough, son. Took you 3 years too long." And there was one more. Standing just inside the doorway, in a red coat that cost more than most people on that street made in a month, was a woman named Simone. Younger, sharp-eyed. She had her phone lifted, and a little red dot on the screen was glowing. She was recording it, and she was smiling too. The kind of smile a person wears when they think they have already won. 3 of them. The husband, the mother, the outsider. 3 smiles pointed at one woman like knives. And what did Nala do? She bent down, slowly, in the wet grass, in front of the whole street. She picked up the dress that had spilled from the suitcase. She folded it, neat, careful, like she had all the time in the world. Then she laid it back inside and pressed the broken zipper shut with 2 fingers. She did not shout. She did not cry. She did not beg. A little boy across the street tugged his mother's sleeve. "Mama, why is that man yelling?" And the mother pulled him back inside and shut the door, because some things you don't let a child watch. But she watched. Through the window she watched. Everybody did. Xavier saw them watching, and it fed him. That is the thing about a cruel man performing for a crowd. Every pair of eyes is fuel. He kicked the suitcase again, harder, and it rolled and stopped against the curb. "You hear me talking to you? After everything this family did for you, we took you in, we put a roof over your head, and you repay us by embarrassing my mother in her own home?" Nobody on that street knew what Nala was supposed to have done. Nobody asked. That's the other cruel thing about a public shaming. People will believe there was a reason just because a man is angry enough. Anger looks like proof to a crowd. It isn't, but it looks like it. "Say something," Xavier snapped. Her silence was doing something to him. It always had. "You stand in there like a statue. Say something." Nala looked up at him. And here is the thing you need to understand, because this is the whole story. Her face was calm, not broken, not begging, calm like deep water is calm. "Okay, Xavier," she said. 2 words, soft. That was all. Watch closely, because this is where it begins. A quiet woman is not empty, remember that. The world forgets it every single time, and every single time the world pays for forgetting it. Loretta laughed on the porch. "You see that?" she said to Simone. Not 1 ounce of fight in her. My son carried this girl for years, fed her, housed her, and she can't even argue for herself." She shook her head like she was disappointed there wasn't more of a show. But why? That is the question you should be asking. Why didn't Nala fight? A woman getting thrown out of her own home, called a beggar in front of 40 neighbors. Why does she just fold a dress and say okay? Hold on to that question. It matters more than anything Xavier is shouting. And there was something else on that lawn, something nobody was looking at. Off to the side of the property, by the row of white rose bushes he tended every single morning, stood the gardener, an old man, Amos. He had worked that yard for 2 years, and in 2 years, Xavier had maybe said 10 words to him. To Xavier and Loretta and Simone, Amos was furniture. He was part of the lawn. You don't talk to the lawn. Amos had been trimming the roses when the shouting started. He had gone still. And now he was watching, but not the way the neighbors were watching. The neighbors watched Xavier. Amos watched Nala. His old eyes never left her, and on his weathered face was something that did not fit the scene at all. It looked like sorrow, but underneath the sorrow, it looked almost like waiting. Why would the gardener be watching the beggar and not the rich man doing the shouting? Xavier grabbed the suitcase again and dragged it further down the lawn toward the street, the wheels catching in the soft ground. "Get off my property," he said. "Go back to whatever gutter I pulled you out of." Xavier, a new voice, quiet, cracked with age. Everybody turned. Amos had set down his shears. He wiped his hands slowly on the cloth at his belt. And then the old man who nobody ever talked to, the man who was part of the lawn, took one step forward and looked Xavier dead in the eye. "You should stop right now before you can take it back." Xavier blinked. For a second, he was too surprised to be angry. Then the anger came. "Excuse me, you work for me, old man. You cut the grass. You don't speak in this house unless somebody speaks to you." Amos didn't move, didn't flinch. He just looked at Xavier with those steady old eyes, and when he spoke again, he spoke 6 words. Only 6. Slow and clear, so every person on that street could hear them. "That woman owns everything you have." Silence. And what happened next, no one on Bellhaven Drive saw coming. But to understand those 6 words, you have to leave this lawn. You have to go back, way back. Long before the big house, before Xavier, before the pearls and the red coat and the wet grass. You have to meet a little girl. Her grandmother raised her in a small house at the edge of a small town. The kind of town where everybody knew your name and your business and how much your daddy drank. Nala's mother was gone early. Her father was a roomer, so it was just the 2 of them, an old woman with strong hands and a little girl with quiet eyes. They didn't have money, let me not dress it up. There were winters they heated one room and slept in it together. There were meals that were really just biscuits and pride. But the grandmother, whose name was Eula, had something better than money. She had a way of seeing. "Baby," Eula used to say, brushing Nala's hair by the window, "you see that bird out there?" And she would point at the little brown sparrow hopping in the dirt while the fancy red cardinals and blue jays showed off in the trees. Everybody watches the pretty loud ones. Nobody watches the sparrow. But you know what? The sparrow's the one that survives the winter. The sparrow flies highest when the storm comes, 'cause nobody's expecting nothing from her. Nala never forgot that. One day, when Nala was 9, Eula came home from cleaning houses across town, and she was carrying something in her fist. She opened her hand. In her palm sat a little bird carved out of dark wood, a sparrow. Rough, handmade, the wings barely more than lines. A man Eula cleaned for had thrown it in the trash. Eula pulled it out. "For you," Eula said, and she pressed it into Nala's small hand. "So you remember, the sparrow the world throws away is still a bird. She can still fly, higher than all of them. You hear me, baby? Higher than all of them." Nala closed her fingers around it, and she carried that little wooden sparrow for the rest of her life. Now here is what the world never understood about Nala. Everybody who met her as a grown woman thought she was soft because she was quiet. But quiet was not soft. Quiet was the sparrow. Quiet was a girl who learned young that you do not announce what you are building, because the loud ones will try to take it, and the jealous ones will try to break it. You build in silence. You fly when nobody is watching. A quiet woman is not an empty one. Her grandmother taught her that with a piece of thrown-away wood, and Nala believed it down to her bones. Eula died when Nala was 19, and in that little house, alone, with the wooden sparrow on the windowsill, Nala made herself a promise. She was not going to be poor. Not because she loved money, because she never again wanted to be at the mercy of someone who had it when she didn't. There is a difference. One is greed. The other is a scar. So she worked. Lord, did she work. She cleaned floors like her grandmother. She took night classes. She read every book she could get her hands on about business, about buying and selling, about how the people at the top actually got there. And slowly, quietly, she started to build. She started small, one little thing that made money. Then she took that money and bought a second little thing. She never bragged. She never posted. She used a plain business name that had nothing to do with her, so nobody would connect the quiet woman with the growing empire. That was on purpose. The sparrow does not sing before she flies. Year after year, in silence, Nala built something enormous. Let me tell you what those years actually looked like, because the world only ever sees the ending. It never sees the middle. The middle was long. The middle was lonely. There were nights she fell asleep at a kitchen table over paperwork, the wooden sparrow next to her elbow, and woke up with ink on her cheek and no one to laugh about it with. There were deals that fell through and left her sick with worry. There were men across negotiating tables who looked at the quiet young woman and thought they could take advantage, and learned too late that the quiet one had read every line of the contract twice while they were busy talking. She never celebrated loud. When she closed something big, she didn't throw a party. She'd go home, make herself a simple plate of food, and sit by the window like her grandmother used to. She'd turn the little sparrow over in her fingers and whisper, "You see me, Grandma? You see the sparrow now?" And then she'd go to bed and get up the next morning and build some more. That is the part nobody wants to hear. Everybody wants the boardroom. Nobody wants the 10,000 quiet mornings it took to earn the right to walk into it. But that's where the sparrow learns to fly. Not in the applause, in the silence, when no one is clapping and no one is watching, and you keep going anyway. And here is the cruel joke of this whole story, the thing you have to hold in your heart while we go back to that lawn. By the time she met Xavier, Nala was already worth more than he would ever dream of. She just never told him. She wanted, for once in her life, to be loved as the sparrow, not as the fortune. She wanted to know if a man could love the quiet woman without knowing what the quiet woman was worth. So she let him think he was rescuing her, and he let himself believe it. Do you see it now? Do you see the shape of what's coming? Keep that little wooden sparrow in your mind. You are going to see it again. They met at a fundraiser Nala's own company was secretly funding, though Xavier never knew that part. He thought she was a guest who wandered in. He was charming back then. Tall, easy smile, a family name that used to mean something in the city even after the money behind it had mostly dried up. That was the part Xavier hid. The Bellhaven house, the pearls, the whole show, it was the last of it. The family firm his father built was sinking, debt underneath it like water under thin ice. Xavier spent his life terrified that someone would find out the great family was almost broke. That fear is important. Hold it, because fear is what turns a charming man cruel. When Xavier married Nala, he told everyone he had married a poor girl with a pretty face and a good heart. He liked that story. It made him the hero. It made him the one with the power. Loretta hated the marriage from the first day. She came from nothing, Xavier, nothing. But even Loretta admitted the girl was useful. Quiet, obedient, grateful, they assumed. For a while, it was almost real. For a while, Nala thought maybe she had found the thing she was looking for, a man who loved the sparrow. But the firm kept sinking, and as it sank, Xavier changed. A man who is drowning will grab anything to feel tall again. And the easiest way to feel tall is to make someone else feel small. So, Zayd's at dinner. Good thing you married up. Bigger know a business deal from a grocery list. He said it and he laughed, and his friends laughed, and Nala just sipped her water and said nothing. Watch what silence costs, because everyone at that table thought her silence meant she agreed. Loretta poured gasoline on it every visit. You let her sit there in your father's house like she's somebody. She's dragging this family down. People are starting to talk. Loretta had one god, and its name was the family reputation. In her mind, the debt was a secret sickness, and Nala was the ugly symptom everyone could see. And then came Simone. Simone worked for a rival firm, one that was circling Xavier's dying company like a buzzard waiting to pick the bones. She was smart. She knew Xavier's firm was worth almost nothing now, but she also knew a desperate, proud man is easy to steer. So she got close. She laughed at his jokes. She touched his arm. She told him the thing he most wanted to hear, that a man like him deserved a real woman, a sharp woman, not the dead weight he'd charity married. "She's holding you back," Simone whispered to him one night. "Everybody sees it but you." Was it love? No. Look at Simone's real motive. She wanted a way inside Xavier's company before her own firm swallowed it, so she'd have leverage, a piece of the pieces. She was using him for scraps. But Xavier, drowning, terrified, hungry to feel like a king again, Xavier heard love. He heard rescue. And you have to understand how careful Simone was. She never told him to hate his wife. That would have been too obvious. Instead, she planted small seeds and let his own fear grow them. "I would never let a man like you feel unappreciated," she'd say. And then she'd go quiet and let Xavier finish the thought himself. She let him think every cruel idea was his own. That is how the best manipulators work. They don't hand you the knife, they just make sure it's lying where your hand will find it. Loretta helped without even meaning to be on Simone's side. The two women never coordinated. They didn't have to. Loretta wanted the family name clean. Simone wanted the family firm cracked open. Different goals, same tool. Get the quiet wife out of the way. And a quiet wife who never defended herself was the easiest target either of them had ever seen. Every day Nala stayed silent. They read it as weakness. Every day they pushed a little harder. There is a lesson buried in there, and it's a hard one. Sometimes the good people around you get punished for their patience. The world mistakes their calm for permission. Remember that, and don't ever make that mistake with someone yourself. So he believed the lie, all of it. He believed his quiet wife was the reason his life had gone wrong. It's easier than believing it was the debt, easier than believing it was him. And Nala? Nala saw everything. She wasn't blind. A woman who can build an empire in silence can certainly see a mistress smile too long at her husband. She saw the arm touches. She saw Loretta's whispering. She saw her marriage rotting from the inside. And something in her went quiet in a new way. Not the strong quiet of the sparrow, a tired quiet, a numb quiet. She stopped correcting them. She stopped explaining. Why explain to people who have already decided who you are? At night, she sat alone and held the little wooden sparrow in her hand, running her thumb over the rough wings, and for the first time in years, she felt like that 9-year-old girl again, cold, in a house that didn't feel like home. You might think, watching her go still like that they had finally broken her. That's what they thought too. But here is what nobody knew. In those same weeks, in her quiet, Nala's people had been working on the biggest deal of her life. Her company, the empire she built in silence, was closing on an acquisition so large it would put her name, her real position, into the mouth valued in the tens of billions of dollars. Money so large it stops being money and starts being weather. It changes the whole climate around a person. And by a twist that even Nala found hard to believe when her lawyers showed her the papers, the failing company being swallowed up inside that giant acquisition, one small firm buried in a mountain of assets changing hands, was Xavier's. He was about to be saved and ruined by the wife he was calling a beggar. Then one evening, a sealed envelope arrived at the house. Heavy paper. Her real name on the front, not the married name. Her name. Nala opened it alone in the kitchen. She read it once. She read it twice. And for the first time in a long time, the numbness cracked, and she smiled to herself. Small, private. The sparrow, feeling the wind change. What was in that envelope? And why did a woman who'd been crying for weeks suddenly stop? 2 days later, Xavier threw her suitcase onto the wet lawn. He had no idea what he had just done. He thought he was ending things on his terms. He thought he was the one with the power. But what happened next, no one saw coming. 3 days after the lawn, the tallest building downtown, top floor, a long glass boardroom with the whole gray city spread out below it, and a wall of cameras set up along one side because the business world had been waiting weeks for this signing, the largest acquisition the region had ever seen. Reporters, executives in dark suits, the soft, expensive hum of important people waiting for money to change hands. Xavier was there. He walked in like he owned the sky, because in his mind, this was his rescue. His firm's lawyers had told him a giant parent company was absorbing his debt as part of a massive deal, and that a representative of the buyer wanted him present for the signing. Xavier heard one word: saved. He had put on his best suit. He had brought Loretta in fresh pearls, and he had brought Simone on his arm in that same red coat, because a man who is about to be a king wants his new queen to see the crown. Watch, he whispered to Simone as they took their seats near the front. Watch, after today, they'll remember the name, my father's name. I'm bringing it back. Simone smiled and squeezed his arm. Behind her smile, she was already thinking about how much of him she could claim once the papers were signed. Everyone in that room wanted something. Only one person was about to get it. Loretta sat with her chin up, sure that finally the family was climbing back to where it belonged. The lawyers shuffled their papers. A man at the front cleared his throat and said, "We're just waiting for the principal owner of the acquiring group. She's arriving now." She. The double doors at the end of the boardroom opened, and Nala walked in. But not the Nala from the lawn. Understand that. The woman who came through those doors did not walk like a beggar. She wore a suit the color of deep charcoal, cut sharp, simple, powerful in the way that only real power ever is. No shouting, no shine, just certainty. 2 lawyers walked half a step behind her. A senior banker held the door. The most important people in that room stood up when she entered. stood up for her. Xavier's face did something complicated. First confusion, then a strange, sick smile, like maybe this was a trick. Maybe there were two women who looked alike. Then Nala's eyes found his across the room, calm as deep water, and the smile fell off his face like it had been slapped off. "Nala?" His voice came out small in that big room. "What are you doing here? This is a private—" "Sit down, Xavier," she said. Not cruel, not loud, just even. "This is my meeting." A ripple went through the room. Reporters leaned forward. The lead lawyer at the front spoke clear and formal. "For those who don't know her, the acquiring group is held and controlled by its founder and majority owner." He gestured toward Nala. "She built it. She owns it. Everything we are signing today happens because she says it happens." And then he said her full name, her real name, the name behind the plain company that had quietly grown into a giant. The name that had been on Xavier was busy dragging a suitcase across a lawn. Loretta made a sound, a small, awful sound, like the air going out of something. Because Loretta understood first. Loretta had spent her whole life measuring people by money and name, and so Loretta was the first to see exactly what her son had done. No, that's the beggar. That's the girl who—" "That's my wife," Xavier said, and for the first time the word wife did not sound like an insult in his mouth. It sounded like a man watching the ground open up. Nala reached the head of the long table. She did not sit, she stood, and she looked down that table at the husband who called her nothing, and she set one small object on the polished wood in front of her. A little wooden sparrow, dark, rough, wings barely more than lines. "There it is. You knew you'd see it again." "My grandmother gave me this," Nala said. And though she spoke softly, the whole room was so silent you could hear the cameras breathing. "When I had nothing, she told me the sparrow the world throws away is still a bird. She can still fly, higher than all of them." Nala turned the little bird a quarter turn with one finger, gentle. "Everybody in my life kept telling me I was nothing. My husband, his mother, and her." She did not even look at Simone, she simply tilted her head. The woman he thought he was trading up for. "Y'all looked at a quiet woman and decided quiet meant empty." She lifted her eyes. "A quiet woman is not an empty one." The third time she'd say those words in her life that mattered, and this time she said them to the people who needed most to learn it, in the moment they could least afford it. Then Nala looked at the lawyers and gave one small nod. "Let's talk about the assets," she said. "Specifically, the small firm buried in the package, Bellhaven Holdings, Xavier's company. I want it noted, for the record, exactly what it's worth." The lawyer read the number. "And here is the last time in this whole story I will speak of money, so hear it well. The firm Xavier had spent his life protecting, the great family name he called Nala too poor to deserve, set beside what this quiet woman had built alone, it was a single coin dropped into an ocean. His entire world, his whole inheritance, everything he had used to make her feel small would not have covered the interest on what she earned while he slept. That was the truth laid bare on the table. The beggar had been carrying him the entire time. The room did not gasp, it went silent. That heavy, total silence that falls when everyone realizes at once that they had been standing in the presence of something they completely failed to see. Xavier stared at the sparrow on the table, at his wife standing tall above it, and the man who had shouted, "You leave with nothing," finally understood who in that marriage had ever truly had anything at all. "Nala," he said, and his voice broke. Nala, please. I didn't know. She looked at him for a long moment, and what was on her face was not hate. That's what made it devastating. It was something worse. It was calm. I know you didn't. That was always the problem. She picked up the pen. Now, some of you are waiting for Nala to scream, to throw it in their faces, to make them beg on their knees the way she was made to fold a dress in the wet grass. She never did. She didn't have to. Because when you are truly holding the power, you don't have to raise your voice. The consequences raise theirs for you. She signed the deal, her name clean and steady on the line that decided everything. And the moment the ink dried, the terms of that giant transaction did to Xavier's world exactly what gravity does to a man who steps off a roof. Bellhaven Holdings was absorbed, restructured. The debt Xavier had hidden for years, the debt that had made him so cruel and so afraid, was called in and settled by the new owners, which meant the family firm, as its own thing, as his thing, simply ceased to exist. His name came off the door. The house on Bellhaven Drive, mortgaged twice over to keep the show running, went with it. Everything he had thrown a woman out of, he was now being thrown out of himself. And Simone? Watch how fast a buzzard flies when the meal turns out to be bones. Simone had come to that boardroom on Xavier's arm in a red coat, planning to claim her piece of a rescued man. But Xavier wasn't rescued. Xavier was ruined, and a ruined man had nothing Simone wanted. Before the meeting had even fully cleared, before Xavier had stopped staring at the table, Simone was gone. She slipped out of the room with her phone already at her ear, chasing the next arm to hold. She didn't even say goodbye. She had never been there for him. She had been there for the smell of money. And now the smell was gone, and so was she. Xavier turned to where she had been standing, and there was just an empty chair and a room full of people watching him realize it. And here is a small thing you might have missed, but I want you to see it. Weeks later, someone told Nala that Simone had tried to reach out to her, not to Xavier, to Nala, trying to smile her way into the winner's circle now that the winner was clear, trying to say she'd always admired her. Nala never answered. She didn't need to. People like Simone spend their whole lives chasing the warm chair, never once understanding that the warmth was never the chair, it was the person, and the person had walked away. And Loretta. Loretta, who had clapped on the porch. Loretta, who had spent a lifetime worshiping the family name and looking down her nose at the girl who came from nothing. Loretta had to walk out of that building and back into a city where everyone now knew the truth, that the great family had been broke for years, propped up in secret by the very woman she'd called a stain on it. The pearls didn't help. The lifted chin didn't help. The neighbors who had watched her clap on the porch had also seen the news, and people have long memories for the proud. The family that clapped when the suitcase hit the grass now had nowhere soft to land. Through all of it, Nala did not gloat. She gathered her papers. She thanked her team, each one by name, and when it was done, she picked up the little wooden sparrow off the boardroom table, closed it gently in her palm, and walked toward the doors. Xavier called after her one more time. "Where am I supposed to go?" he said, not angry now, lost. "Nala, where do I go?" She paused at the door. She didn't turn all the way around. "You came with nothing," she said softly. "You'll figure the rest out." His own words, handed back to him without a drop of cruelty in them. That was the whole punishment. She simply let him hear himself. A quiet woman is not an empty one. He had heard it 3 times now. He would hear it in his sleep for years. And then Nala walked out with her head level and her steps unhurried, carrying a little carved bird and leaving behind a fortune's worth of people who thought she was worth nothing at all. Let me take you one last place. Not a boardroom, not a big house on Bellhaven Drive. A small garden, months later, at the back of a modest home Nala kept for herself. Not the biggest thing her money could buy, just the one that felt most like the little house at the edge of that small town. There were white roses along the fence, and every morning an old man came to tend them. Amos. Because Amos had never really just been the gardener, had he? He was the man who raised his shears on that lawn and spoke 6 words when no one else would. He had been with Nala's estate for years, a quiet keeper of quiet things, one of the few people on this earth who knew exactly who the sparrow was the whole time. He'd taken the gardening post at Belhaven himself, watching over her from the edge of the roses, because a woman who builds in silence still needs one honest pair of eyes nearby. He had waited and watched, and on the worst morning of her life, he had stepped forward. "Do they ever apologize?" Amos asked her one morning, snipping a dead bloom. "The husband, the mother." "Xavier wrote a letter," Nala said. She was sitting on the step in the sun, the wooden sparrow in her open hand. "Loretta didn't." "You read it?" "I did." She turned the sparrow over. "He said he finally understood. Said the day I walked into that boardroom, he saw me for the first time, really saw me, and he hated himself for needing to lose everything before his eyes opened." She was quiet a moment. "He asked how long I'd known what he was, what Loretta was, what all of it was." "What'd you tell him?" "Nothing. I didn't write back." She looked out at the roses. "Some doors you close soft, Amos. You don't have to slam them. You just have to walk through and keep walking." Amos smiled at that. "Your grandmother would have liked that line." "She'd have said it first," Nala said, and for the first time in the whole story, she laughed, a real one, small and warm, the laugh of a woman who was finally, truly free. "I forgave him," she went on, softer. "Not for him, for me. You can't carry that much in flying." Amos nodded slowly, the way old men nod when a young person finally says something they've known for 50 years. And that is the thing I want to leave with you before the story ends. Nala did not win because she got rich. She was rich the whole time. She won because she never let the loud, cruel people convince her that quiet meant weak. She won because she remembered a sparrow in the dirt while everyone else was watching the loud, bright birds show off in the trees, and she remembered which one survives the winter. Never measure a person by how loudly they speak or how little they choose to show you. The one folding her dress in silence on the wet grass may be holding more than everyone laughing on the porch combined. Dignity, kept in quiet, is not weakness. It is the deepest kind of strength there is. Nala stood up from the step. She walked to the edge of the garden where the soil was turned and dark and ready, and she knelt down. In her hand was a single seed. She pressed it into the earth, covered it, and patted the ground once, gently, the way her grandmother used to pat her hair by the window. Then she set the little wooden sparrow on the fence post above it, facing the open sky, and she went inside to start the rest of her life. A quiet woman is not an empty one. Don't you ever forget it. If Nala's silence taught you something today, don't keep it to yourself. Like this story did right now. Someone who is folding their dress in the wet grass while the world laughs on the porch. Tell them it's not over. And tell me down below, the moment the gardener stepped forward and spoke those 6 words, did you feel it? Did it give you chills? Because the quietest people in the room are never, ever the weakest. I'll see you in the next one. Now that's what real class looks like.
Laughter rolled across the ballroom. Diane froze. The diamond on the woman's finger was her late mother's ring. His mother smiled. His sisters applauded. Diane never said a word. 10 years ago, she signed the papers that built this company, and not one person in that room knew whose name was really on the door. Some women build a man, Obina told the crowd, and some women just hold him back. His mother lifted her glass. "A clean break is kinder, Diane. Don't make a scene." Diane looked at the ring on the stranger's hand. She had no idea what she was about to prove to every soul in that room. That night, in the ballroom of the estate Obina built, he humiliated the quiet woman he thought had nothing. He put her dead mother's ring on another woman's finger while his family clapped. Chidinma smiled for the cameras. Adayez sipped her champagne and called it kindness. He had no idea the woman he was throwing into the storm was the one who quietly held everything he loved. Diane did not cry. She only touched the folded letter she had carried for years. And if you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, double stories. And before we begin, let me know. But Obina had not always been this cruel. There was a time he loved her. Diane remembered it in pieces. She remembered a young man with holes in his shoes standing outside her clinic in the rain, waiting 3 hours just to walk her home. He had no umbrella. He had no car. He had a drawing of a building folded in his pocket and a voice full of tomorrow. One day, he told her under that leaking clinic roof, I will build something with your name in it. She had laughed at him. He had not laughed back. He meant it. She married him with nothing but that promise. Her father, Chief Nduka, watched the young man carefully. The chief liked hunger, but the chief loved his daughter more, so he did something quiet. He put the land and the company he was helping build under a trust, and he named one person to hold it all, Diane. Sign here, my daughter, he said, not for today, for a day you cannot see yet. She signed. She trusted him. Then she went back to work and forgot the papers existed. The early years were sweet. Diane remembered a night on the unfinished roof of Obina's very first project. No walls yet, just concrete and stars. He spread a cloth and they ate rice from one plate because they only had one plate. When this is a real building, he said, I will bring you back here. I will remind you we started with nothing. He never brought her back because the money came and the money changed him. When Obina's father fell sick, it was Diane who bathed him, fed him, sat through the long nights. She left nursing to do it. When their daughter Amaka was born, it was Diane who raised her alone while Obina chased contracts across the country. She gave up the uniform she loved, her salary, her sleep. And Obina grew colder as he grew richer. He stopped saying thank you. Then he stopped saying her name. The wife, he called her, like she was a chair in the house she made a home. His mother, Adayez, made it worse, with cruelty that sounded like advice. You were a nurse, she smiled over dinner. Sweet work, but not a name that opens doors. Diane passed the salt. She did not fight, but she noticed things. A name that kept surfacing, Chidinma. A consultant, Obina said. The late calls, a perfume that was not hers, a photo from a conference where a woman stood too close, her hand resting on his arm like it belonged there. And she noticed the envelope, her mother's letter, sealed with wax, given to her the week her mother died. Open it the day you need it most. You will know the day. Every year she looked at it. Every year she put it back. The day had not come. It came closer the evening Obina asked her to sign something. He came home smiling for the first time in months. He had papers about the land. Just a formality, he said, pen already in his hand, for the New Deal. Diane reached for the pen. Then she stopped. His smile was too fast. His hand shook the paper, too eager. Let me read it first, she said. The smile dropped. It's nothing you'd understand. Then it can wait until tomorrow. That night she called the one man her father told her to call. Barrister Emeka Enosi answered on the second ring as if he had waited 10 years. Chief Nduka's daughter, he said softly. I wondered when you would ring. They met at a quiet cafe. He was old now, gray and calm as still water. Do not sign anything, he said. Not for him, not for anyone. Your father left you more than you think. Money? In time. There's more, but not yet. He met her eyes. For now, only watch and bring me what he brings you. Diane left with more questions than answers. That was exactly how it should be. The next morning she opened her jewelry box to wear her mother's ring the way she did on the anniversary of her mother's death. The velvet corner was empty. The ring was gone. Her hands went cold. She searched the whole room, drawer by drawer, breath climbing in her chest. Then she found the reason. A payment on the household account to a jewelry appraiser 3 weeks old. He had not lost the ring, he had sold it. That night she did not scream. She waited for him at the table with her hands folded. "Where is my mother's ring, Obina?" For one moment something crossed his face. Shame. The old Obina flickered there, the boy in the rain, the man who ate rice from one plate. He opened his mouth. She thought for one breath that he would tell the truth, that he would break. "It's in the bank," he said instead, "for safekeeping." The flicker died. He chose the lie. And Diane understood in that quiet moment that the man she married was already gone. She did not cry. She began to write everything down. Emeka pulled records. He laid 3 pages on his desk and pointed. "The company he built sits on land he does not own. It belongs to your father's trust. He has been paying rent to a landlord he cannot see." He tapped the page. "You are the landlord." Diane stared. "And the deal he's chasing?" "Cannot close without the trust's signature. There is more, but not yet." She drove home steady on the wheel, her heart loud in her ears. Then Obina brought the papers back. This time he did not ask her to read. "Sign at the bottom, before the office closes." The pen was ready. The smile was back. While he took a call in the next room, Diane photographed every page and sent them to Emeka. Emeka called within the hour, and his calm voice had an edge. "The signature on page 4, Diane. It is already there. Yours, dated last month." A pause. "You did not sign this." "No." "He forged your name to sell the land." She closed her eyes. "Who is the buyer?" "That," Emeka said, "is what we find next." The buyer had a face, a development company, and behind it, listed as a consultant, one name: Chidinma. The woman on Obina's arm was not just his mistress, she was the buyer's inside hand. She is not with him for love, she is steering him toward a sale that ruins him and enriches her people. He thinks he is using her, she is using him. Diane sat back. The man who thought he was so clever was the last to know he was drowning. Does he know? No, and we will not tell him. That was the day the game turned, because that was the day Adaze laid her move. She invited Diane to lunch and slid a document across the table, gentle as a blessing. "Sign this, my dear. It is best for Amaka." Diane read it. A custody arrangement. It called her unfit due to instability. It gave Obina full custody of their daughter. It was already stamped. "You have no income," she smiled, "no home, no name. A child needs stability. Grief and pride do not raise children." Diane's hand did not shake, but under the table her heart broke in half. They were not only taking her marriage, they were reaching for her daughter. She said, "I will think about it." "Don't think too long. These things move fast." She went straight to Emeka, and for the first time her voice trembled. "They want Amaka." Emeka was quiet a long moment. Then he opened his drawer and took out a thick, sealed file. "Then it is time you knew the rest. You're 51%. You do not just own the ground beneath Obina, you own more than half of everything he built, and the trust has moves without the true successor's signature, yours. A forged one is not a mistake, it is a crime." Diane stared at him. "So the deal cannot happen without you. It never could. The custody papers mean nothing against a woman who owns the family fortune. But they do not know that. They think you have nothing." For the first time in 10 years, she felt the ground under her feet. "When is the anniversary gala?" 2 weeks. Then in 2 weeks, they learn who I am." She did not cry. She began to plan. But the storm was not finished with her. 3 days later, her phone rang at midnight. It was a nurse at the hospital. Amaka had been attacked outside his office. A car had waited for him in the dark. He was bruised, shaken, alive. Diane rushed to his bedside. His face was cut. His voice was low. "They came for the file, Diane." She went cold. "Which file?" "Kit, his mother's men were in my office tonight." He closed his eyes. "The safe is empty. They took everything." The room seemed to tilt. Everything she had gathered, the proof, gone. Without the original documents, her father's copies, the certificate with his seal, she could prove nothing. The gala was 11 days away, and now she had a folder full of photographs and a lawyer in a hospital bed. Obina had almost won. Diane drove home in the dark with her hands shaking on the wheel for the first time in the whole story. She sat on the floor of her bedroom, and her eyes fell on the jewelry box, on the one thing they had not thought to take, the one thing they did not know existed. Her mother's sealed letter. "Open it the day you need it most." Her hands were steady now. She broke the wax. Inside, in her mother's careful hand, were words she would carry the rest of her life. "My daughter, if you are reading this, the world has tried to make you small. Do not let it. We put everything in your hands because your heart would never grow greedy, only strong. The ring is not the treasure. You are. Stand up straight. Owe no one an apology for surviving. Love, Mama." And folded behind the letter was one more thing, a second original deed, her mother's own signed copy, sealed and dated the year Diane was born. The one document in the world Adaize's men could never have found. Diane pressed it to her chest and wept once for her mother. Then she stood up. They thought they had taken everything. They had missed the only thing that mattered. But Obina was not done humiliating her. A week before the gala, she came home to find her belongings on the front lawn, her clothes in bags, her shoes in the dirt, Amaka's small toys in a box by the gate. The neighbors stood watching from their windows. Obina stood on the steps of the house her family owned, arms crossed. "You have until dark," he said, loud enough for the street to hear. "This is my house, my name. You brought nothing into this marriage, and you will leave with nothing." Adaize stood beside him, smiling that smile. "A clean break is kinder. Don't embarrass yourself, Diane." The neighbors murmured. Someone laughed. Diane picked up Amaka's small box of toys from the dirt. She did not scream. She did not beg. She looked up at the man on the steps of a house he did not own, evicting her from land that was hers. "You're right," she said quietly. "I'll leave with exactly what I came with." He did not understand the smile that touched her mouth. He would. She carried her daughter to a small room across town, and she made one phone call. Not to cry, to confirm the paperwork was clean. The days before the gala were quiet on the surface, moving like water underneath. Amaka, healing, worked from his bed. With her mother's original deed and certificate, he rebuilt the whole case stronger than before. Every piece held: the forged signature, the appraisal for the ring, the trail from Chidima to the buyer, the custody scheme with Adaize's scamp on it. It is clean, Amaka said, every page. But Diane, understand, the men who took my file will tell Obina you have nothing left to prove. Obina will walk into that gala certain he has already won. Diane looked at her mother's ring, the empty place on her hand where it used to sit. Good, she said. Let him. On the night of the gala, she wore a simple dark gown. No jewels. She did not need them. She carried a plain leather folder, and she walked into the ballroom of the estate her family had always owned, into the room where they meant to bury her, calm as still water. You know how they greeted her. Obina lifted Chidinma's hand and showed the room her mother's ring. Now that's what real class looks like. The laughter, his mother's smile, his sister's clapping. Some women build a man, he said, and some just hold him back. Diane stood very still in the center of the room. Then she spoke, so quietly the room leaned in. You're right, Obina. Some women build. She opened the folder. Obina laughed. Save it, Diane. Nobody wants to hear a housewife. This land does not belong to you. She laid down the first page. It belongs to my father's trust. The second page. This company is not yours either. 51% of it is mine. It has been since before we married. The third page. The deal you have chased for months cannot close without my signature, not a forged one. She looked up. A real one. Obina's face went gray. And this, she said, laying down the fourth page, is the signature you forged, dated a day I was at our daughter's school. She set down the appraisal. The same month you sold my mother's ring to buy the diamond on that woman's hand. The room was silent. Chidinma's smile had frozen. You thought you took my proof last week, Diane said. You took copies. She laid her mother's original deed on the marble. You never knew my mother left me her own. Adaze set down her glass. Her hand was not steady. You, Diane said, turning to Chidinma, are not a consultant. You work for the buyer. You have been steering my husband toward a sale that would have ruined him. She slid one more page across the floor. It is all here. Chidinma stepped back from Obina like he had caught fire. Diane did not raise her voice. She did not cry. She did not scream. Her calm was the sharpest thing in the room. You evicted me from a house that is mine. You called me nothing for 10 years while you stood inside everything my family owned. She gathered the folder. I signed the papers that built this company. I just never told you what I signed. That should have ended it. It did not. Emeka stepped from the edge of the room where he had stood the whole time, bruises still on his face. 2 officers stood behind him. Mr. Okafor, forging a trust successor's signature is not a family matter. It is a crime, and the men who attacked me last week left a trail your mother paid for. Obina's knees nearly gave. But the deepest blow came from a mouth no one expected. Chidinma. Cornered, watching her deal die, she turned on the man she had used. He knew, she spat, pointing to Obina. He knew the custody papers were fake. His mother had them drawn to force Diane out before the sale, so she couldn't stop it. The eviction, the gala, all of it was planned. He told me himself. By the time she understands anything, it will be too late. The whole room turned to Adaze. The custody papers meant to steal Amaka had just become proof of a conspiracy. It had all been planned, premeditated. Diane looked at the woman who had called cruelty kindness for 10 years. You told me grief does not change reality, she said softly. You're right, it doesn't. She stepped forward and took her mother's ring from Chidinma's trembling hand, gently, the way you take back what was always yours. But the truth does. She slid the ring onto her own finger. It fit like it had been waiting. The weeks that followed were quiet in a different way. The deal collapsed. The rival buyer walked from a company they could never legally touch. Chidinma vanished. Obina faced charges for the forgery and the assault his mother paid for, and the false custody scheme fell apart in front of a judge who did not like being lied to. Adaze stopped smiling in public. Diane did not gloat. That was not who her mother raised. She took control of the company her father built. She kept the workers who had families to feed. She ran it clean. But she did more than run a company. She went back to the land that had always been her family's, and on a green stretch of it, she began to build something new. A wide, bright house, a training center beside it, a place for women thrown out with nothing, women told they were nothing, mothers left at bus stops and hospital doors with a baby and no name to lean on. She called it Nenna Home, after her mother. She taught nursing there again, the work she had loved and given up. She hired lawyers like Emeka to fight for women who could not fight alone. On the day it opened, Diane stood at the gate with Amaka's small hand in hers. Her mother's ring caught the sun. An old woman who had come with nothing but a child on her back asked why she had built it. Diane thought of a sealed letter, a hidden deed, a voice that said, "The ring is not the treasure, you are." "Because someone once left me more than I knew," she said, "and I promised to pass it on." She did not make a speech. She only opened the gate, and she let the women walk in. If scribe